Welcome to Threads of Truth, the podcast where real-life mysteries meet internet speculation. Today, we walk through the tragic and controversial case of Mitrice Richardson.
This is a story that just refuses to go away, and for good reason. It's a case that is absolutely haunted by this profound sense of institutional failure.
It really is, because the whole mystery, the entire tragedy, it hinges on this one decision, a decision made by the very people who were supposed to ensure her safety.
Exactly. We're talking about Mitrice Richardson. She was a bright 24-year-old, a college graduate, working as an executive assistant in Los Angeles. She had her whole life ahead of her.
And yet her story ends not at home, but somewhere in a remote, dark canyon in Malibu.
And it unfolds in this almost painful slow motion. All of it circling back to the moment she was released from custody.
And that is the central, unsettling question that just hangs over everything. Why? Why was this young woman released alone in the middle of the night? It was 12:28 a.m. to be exact, into this dark, rural area of Malibu.
An area with no lights, no public transport at that hour.
Miles from her car, which had been impounded. And this is the part that gets me. She had absolutely nothing. No phone, no wallet, no money.
She was truly just cast out into the dark. And that decision, that single moment of release from the Lost Hills Sheriff's Station, that's the foundational tragedy here, just highlights this massive gap between following the bare minimum of the law and, an actual duty of care.
It feels like a catastrophic failure of judgment, especially when, as we'll get into, the warning signs were so incredibly obvious.
They were flashing bright red.
Yeah. Okay, so let's unpack this timeline. To really get the gravity of that release, we have to understand Mitrice herself and what led to her even being arrested in the first place.
That context is absolutely vital. I mean, Mitrice wasn't just a name on a report. She was vibrant, she was educated, she had a psychology degree from Cal State Fullerton, she was involved in her community.
So she was accomplished, stable, by all accounts.
Very. But her family later provided the critical piece of the puzzle. They came forward and said they believed she was experiencing a severe bipolar episode at the time.
And the significance of that, if true, it changes everything.
It changes the entire narrative. Because if she's in a manic or psychotic state, she's not thinking clearly. She's cognitively impaired. And that should have triggered all sorts of protocols meant to protect vulnerable people.
Protocols that were just completely ignored, it seems.
It seems so. I mean, if we take the family's claim at face value, she was in a state of crisis, profoundly vulnerable. Her professional, stable life was just in stark contrast to the behavior people saw on that last night.
And that crisis really came to a head on the evening of September 16th, 2009, at Jeffrey's, an upscale restaurant in Malibu. What exactly went down there?
So the reports from both staff and other diners are pretty consistent. They all described her behavior as bizarre. She was there by herself, and apparently was saying things like she was from Mars, speaking in a strange language.
So clearly something was off.
Very off. And then she tried to leave without paying her $89 bill. But it wasn't like a sneaky dine and dash. Her behavior suggested something much deeper, a real mental disturbance. Patrons said she was sounding crazy.
And the charges they arrested her for were, what, incredibly minor, right?
Oh, unbelievably minor. Suspicion of not paying for the meal and possession of less than an ounce of marijuana. I mean, these are low-level misdemeanors.
Normally, someone with no record would probably just get a citation, maybe have to post a small bail.
Exactly, which is what makes the final outcome so shocking. The low level of the crime gave deputies the legal justification to release her quickly, but it completely masked the real emergency, which was her mental state.
And this is a key detail. The restaurant staff themselves, they were alarmed.
That's the pivotal detail right there. The staff were so concerned that they specifically asked the sheriff's department to send deputies not just to arrest her, but to assess her condition.
So they recognized it. They saw it wasn't a crime, it was a health crisis.
They did. Yeah. They flagged it as a potential medical or psychiatric issue before she even got to the station.
So the deputies booking her at the Lost Hills station, they had to have known this. They had a report, note, something indicating this bizarre behavior.
You would think so. The warning signs were all there. It really should have raised red flags for what's known in California as a 5150 hold.
Right, the 72-hour psychiatric hold.
Precisely. A 5150 allows law enforcement to involuntarily detain someone who, because of a mental health disorder, is a danger to themselves or others, or is gravely disabled.
And her behavior, the erratic talk, not being able to handle a simple bill, that seems to tick the gravely disabled box pretty clearly.
It should have at least started a serious conversation about a psychiatric hold, at the very least.
But it didn't. Instead, we go straight to this unbelievable release decision just after midnight.
And this is where the geography becomes so important. She's released at 12:28 a.m. from the Lost Hills Station. If you know that area, it's at the mouth of Malibu Canyon. It's dark, it's remote, it's semi-mountainous.
There's nothing out there. No streetlights, no sidewalks, and definitely no buses running at that hour.
It's a total void. And she's released into it completely isolated. Her car was impounded, which is a huge problem on its own.
But then on top of that, no phone, no money, no wallet. It's like they stripped her of every possible tool for survival in the modern world.
It's an indefensible situation for anyone, let alone someone who is obviously vulnerable. But it gets worse.
The family's intervention.
Yes. Her mother, the T. Sutton, found out she'd been arrested, and she called the jail. She sensed her daughter was in crisis. She told them she was worried. She explained her concerns about Mitrice's mental health.
And what was she told?
She was reportedly promised by the jail staff that Mitrice would not be released until later the next morning. That would give the family time to get there and pick her up safely.
A promise that was broken just a few hours later. That's arguably the most damning part of this whole thing.
It's a monumental breach of trust, of protocol, of just basic human decency. If the mother's account is accurate, and the later lawsuit suggests it was, the deputies chose paperwork over a direct warning from a family member.
So given all that, the bizarre behavior, the mother's frantic call, the promise, what was the LA Sheriff's Department's official reason for letting her go?
Their defense was, very rigid, purely by the book. Legally speaking, they said she was an adult, the charges were minor, and she had supposedly refused their offer to let her wait in the lobby until morning.
She refused, a person who is potentially in a psychotic state.
Exactly. And they insisted that during her time in custody, she exhibited no signs of mental illness or intoxication.
But that directly contradicts what the restaurant staff said. It contradicts what her own mother said.
It's a complete clash of narratives, and it really makes you question the training. Did these deputies not know how to recognize the signs of a manic episode? Or did they just not want to deal with the paperwork?
It seems like they prioritized clearing the books over her safety.
That's what it boils down to. They used her refusal to wait. A refusal from a person who may not have been capable of making a rational decision as their justification. It's a fundamental breach.
But she didn't just vanish right outside the station doors. There were sightings.
Right. The timeline doesn't end there. Several hours later, around 6:30 in the morning, people in the Montanito area, which is this secluded community deeper in the canyon, started calling 911.
And this is where we get the last confirmed sighting of her.
Yes, in the backyard of a former KTLA news anchor, Bill Smith. He and his family saw a young black woman, who they later confirmed was Mitrice, just wandering around their property. She looked disoriented.
What did she say when they talked to her?
When the homeowner asked what she was doing, she just said she was resting.
Resting. In a stranger's backyard, 7 miles from where she was released.
It confirms two things. One, she was still alive almost 6 hours later. And two, she was still in that highly vulnerable, confused state. She couldn't explain herself or ask for help. It completely undercuts the LASD's claim that she was fine.
It's a direct contradiction. How can they say she showed no signs when hours later she's wandering disoriented in a backyard?
And there's one more detail from the station itself that has fueled so much suspicion over the years.
The other deputy.
Yeah. The station surveillance video showed another deputy leaving the station in their patrol car about 2 minutes after Mitrice walked out.
2 minutes. That's very close.
It is. The LASD claimed it was totally unrelated, just a deputy starting a shift or going on patrol. But for critics and for the family, that timing is just too much of a coincidence. Did that deputy see her on the road? Was there some kind of interaction that went unreported? It adds this whole layer of suspicion to the official story.
So after that last sighting, the one in the backyard at Montanito, she just vanishes for 11 months.
11 agonizing months. The search was massive. Family, volunteers, law enforcement, but nothing. Just silence.
A silence that must have been torture for her family, knowing the circumstances of how she went missing.
Absolutely. And then the terrible breakthrough finally came, August 9th, 2010. Park rangers were out in Dark Canyon, which is near Montanito, looking into an illegal marijuana grow.
And they found her.
They stumbled upon partial mummified human remains in a remote creek bed.
And Dark Canyon that's about 7 miles from the sheriff's station, right?
Roughly, yes.
Yeah.
It's a significant distance to cover on foot, especially in that kind of rugged, mountainous terrain. For someone who is disoriented, it's a hell of a journey.
But the location of the discovery, that immediately raised more questions, didn't it?
It did, big questions. Because that specific area, that canyon, had supposedly been searched by official crews early on in the investigation.
Wait, so they had searched there before and found nothing.
That's the inconsistency that just piles on top of the initial negligence. It suggests one of two things. Either the search was grossly incompetent, or her body wasn't there during the initial search.
Which would imply it was moved there later.
It opens up that possibility, yes. Or that she was just in a spot so secluded that even trained searchers missed it. Either way, it casts this huge shadow over the entire police effort.
Let's talk about the scene itself, the state of her remains, and why the handling of the evidence became so controversial.
The remains were partial and mummified, which is what you'd expect after nearly a year in those dry canyon conditions. Her clothing was found scattered nearby. The scene was already compromised by time and the elements.
But then it was compromised by human interference.
Allegedly, yes. And this is a critical point. A deputy at the scene was accused of moving some of her remains, specifically part of her skull, against the direct orders of the coroner on site.
That's forensic misconduct 101. You never touch anything. Why on earth would a deputy do that?
It is a catastrophic, fundamental error. If it's true, it irrevocably contaminates the scene. The chain of custody is broken. The spatial relationship between the body and the other evidence, like the scattered clothes, is destroyed.
So any chance of finding subtle clues about what happened to her was basically lost.
Severely damaged, if not completely eliminated. You lose any chance of seeing trauma patterns, defensive wounds, anything that could point to cause of death.
And because of all that, the decomposition and the alleged mishandling of the scene, what was the official cause of death?
Undetermined. The Los Angeles County Coroner's Office couldn't say for sure how she died. They couldn't rule out an accident, exposure, or homicide.
Which is a family's worst nightmare. No answers, no closure.
It's the official confirmation that they don't know, which allows every theory, every suspicion to live on forever. The family has always maintained she was a victim of foul play. The undetermined classification means that possibility officially remains on the table.
And all of this, the negligent release and the bungled investigation, it led to legal action.
It did. Mitrice's parents filed a civil lawsuit against LA County. And it's important to be clear, they weren't suing for murder. They were suing over the negligence of her release.
And they won, or rather they settled.
Yes, her parents were each awarded $450,000 in a settlement. And this is hugely significant, legally and symbolically. By agreeing to pay, the county was legally acknowledging that their procedures failed, that the negligence was real, and it put Mitrice in extreme danger.
So the county admitted they messed up the release.
Yes.
But that admission gives zero answers about how she actually died in that canyon.
And that's the dichotomy. That is precisely why this case is still so controversial. They got financial restitution, they got a legal confirmation of negligence, but they got no truth about her final moments.
So the legal settlement confirms the negligence. That part is fact. But now we have to get into the theories of what happened after 12 to 8 a.m.
Right. And the theories really branch out from that initial failure. Let's start with the one that's most directly tied to the lawsuit, the simple negligence theory.
This one isn't so much about how she died, but that the deputies are wholly responsible for creating the situation where she could die.
Exactly. The argument is that releasing a person who is clearly having a mental health crisis, whose mom has called and warned you, into the dark with no resources, it's just gross, actionable negligence. Common sense and protocol should have overridden the desire to just clear the arrest log.
We keep coming back to the family's belief she was having a severe bipolar episode. If that's the case, why would the deputies claim she showed no signs?
Well, there are two possibilities, neither of them good. One is a massive training failure. People in a manic state can sometimes seem very articulate, even charming or overly confident. they might not have known what to look for.
And the other possibility.
The other is that they did know what a 5150 hold would entail. All the paperwork, transporting her to a psychiatric facility, the logistics, and they simply chose the path of least resistance. Just release her and make her someone else's problem.
A choice that prioritized their workflow over her life.
It's the ultimate consequence for the easiest action. But okay, so their negligence puts her on the road. The next theory tries to explain what happened to her out there in the canyon.
The accidental death or exposure theory.
Right. And this one is, on the surface, very plausible. You have a disoriented person, likely in a state of psychosis, wandering through extremely rugged, dark terrain. It's filled with ravines, thick brush, wildlife. It's very easy to imagine her getting lost, falling, becoming dehydrated, and succumbing to the elements.
And the fact that she was found 7 miles away, wandering disoriented, it makes a tragic accident seem, well, pretty straightforward.
It does. And the location where she was found, a secluded creek bed, that could support the idea she was seeking water or shelter before she collapsed. Even the scattered remains could be explained by animal activity after she died from natural causes.
But this theory has some major holes in it.
Huge holes. It runs right up against those inconsistencies we talked about. First, why was her body found in an area that was supposedly searched thoroughly? If she died there right after she went missing, they should have found her.
And second, the deputy moving the remains.
Yes. If it was a simple tragic accident, there is absolutely no reason for a law enforcement officer to risk their entire career by contaminating a forensic scene. It makes no sense.
And those holes are what lead directly to the darkest theories: foul play and a potential cover-up.
Which is what the Richardson family has always believed. They have never accepted the accident narrative. They are convinced she met with foul play.
What's the strongest evidence pointing in that direction?
Well, you have to look at the cluster of irregularities. The delayed discovery in a searched area suggests the body might have been moved there later. The scattered clothing could be a sign of a struggle. And then the big one, the deputy moving her remains. Why would you do that unless you're trying to hide something about how she died?
And you have to circle back to the other deputy leaving the station just 2 minutes after her.
In the vacuum of answers, that detail becomes fuel for the fire. It's the foundation for a lot of the online speculation. Could there have been an encounter on that dark road right after she was released? Did something happen that was never reported? It shifts the whole case from a tragedy of incompetence to a potential crime scene that was compromised from within.
It really forces us to look at the bigger picture here, the systemic issues. What does this case symbolize for people?
It's a devastating case study in institutional gaps. It's where mental health response and policing just completely fail to connect. You have a vulnerable person arrested for almost nothing who needed medical help, but instead was put in the most high-risk environment imaginable.
The system failed her at every single turn. The restaurant staff saw it, her mother saw it, and the deputies either didn't see it or chose to ignore it.
And that's why it resonates so deeply. Her story has become this potent symbol of what happens when a system prioritizes bureaucracy over human life,
Right.
especially when it comes to vulnerable people. The very institution that put her in harm's way was then in charge of investigating her disappearance.
That's a massive conflict of interest.
A huge one. The chain of accountability was broken twice. First when they released her, and second when they handled the scene where she was found. Because of that, this case is more than just a tragedy. It's a textbook example of why the public demands more oversight and more accountability from law enforcement.
So we've established the negligence. That's a legal fact from the settlement. But how does that fact connect to the complete unknown of how she died?
The settlement is the bedrock. LA County admitted they created the dangerous situation. But like we said, that only confirms the negligence of the release. It does absolutely nothing to solve the mystery of what happened to her in the canyon.
So no matter how she died, the LASD is responsible for putting her in that position. If it was an accident, they made the accident possible. If it was foul play, they basically delivered her to a predator.
The initial error is the catalyst for everything that follows. And that's why the civil settlement, while it's some form of justice, it's not the closure the Richardson family needs. They know the system failed. They just don't know the truth of her final hours.
Why do you think this specific case continues to be so controversial? What are the key elements that prevent any kind of real closure?
I think it boils down to three things. First, the contamination of the scene. The allegation that a deputy moved her remains just permanently destroy the chances of forensic science giving a clear answer. It creates permanent doubt.
If you can't trust the evidence, you can't find the truth.
Exactly. Second, the result of that is the undetermined cause of death. It's an official shrug. It means that the foul play theory and the accident theory are, legally speaking, on equal footing forever. And third, the conflicting stories about her mental state. If the LASD say she was fine and everyone else says she was in crisis, you can't even agree on the starting point.
It all comes back to that critical policy gap, doesn't it? The failure to treat a mental health crisis as a medical emergency.
That's the ultimate lesson here. Policing has to be flexible enough to pivot from a law enforcement role to a crisis management role. This case is just a tragic reinforcement of the need for better mental health training, mandatory training for all officers.
And for the Richardson family, the fight continues. The settlement confirmed the failure, but it didn't bring accountability for her death.
They're fighting for the truth of what happened out in that canyon. The settlement validated their claim of negligence at the station, but it doesn't explain why her body was found where it was or why the scene was compromised. They need transparency about the investigation itself.
The story of Mitrice Richardson's last night is just this painful illustration of how one terrible decision, releasing her into the dark, created this massive void. A void that was then filled with suspicion and investigative missteps.
The loss is twofold. It's the tragic loss of Mitrice's life, of course, but it's also the public's loss of confidence that the system will protect its most vulnerable.
Mitrice Richardson's last night raises profound questions about public safety, vulnerability, and the accountability of institutions tasked with protecting citizens, especially those experiencing a health crisis. The mystery of her final moments in the darkness of Malibu Canyon remains an open wound.
A painful, open wound that really should force us to look harder at the duty of care that we expect from those in power.
Next time, we look into the haunting disappearance of Emma Filipoff, a young woman last seen barefoot and afraid outside a Victoria hotel before she walked into the night and vanished.